On the morning of November 14th, 1897, the residents of Ashford Hollow, Maine, discovered something that would haunt their small logging community for decades to come. A young woman's body, or rather what remained of it, was found at the edge of Widow's Grove, approximately 3 miles from the town centre. The corpse was positioned in an unnatural manner, arms spread wide, face turned toward the sky. But what disturbed the local constable most was not the positioning. It was the silver locket, clutched so tightly in the victim's hand that her fingers had to be broken post-mortem to retrieve it. The locket bore an inscription in Latin, Argentum vincit bestium. Silver conquers the beast. The victim was Cordelia Thorne, 28 years old, a librarian who had arrived in Ashford Hollow only 7 months prior. She had been a quiet, reserved woman who kept to herself, organizing the town's modest collection of books and historical documents. But in the weeks leading to her death, townsfolk reported strange behavior. Cordelia had become obsessed with the lunar calendar, marking each full moon with red ink in the library's ledger. She had requested, repeatedly and urgently, any material related to hereditary madness, blood diseases, and the Salem witch trials of 1692. The night she died was the full moon of November. Welcome to this journey into one of New England's most disturbing historical mysteries. Before we dive deeper into the darkness that consumed the Thorne bloodline, I want to hear from you, our community of truth seekers. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from right now, and what time is it in your corner of the world? Are you alone, or do you have company as we uncover this forgotten tragedy together? Now let us return to Ashford Hollow, Maine, in the year 1897. This was an era of industrial progress and scientific rationalism, yet in isolated communities like Ashford Hollow, old superstitions still lingered like morning fog over the pine forests. The town itself was unremarkable. A collection of timber mills, a general store, a small Presbyterian church, and roughly 300 souls trying to carve out a living from the unforgiving northern wilderness. Cordelia Thorne's arrival in April of that year had been noted but not particularly welcomed. The position of town librarian had been vacant for nearly 2 years after the previous occupant, an elderly widow named Mrs. Blackwood, had succumbed to pneumonia. When Cordelia appeared, carrying a single leather trunk and a letter of introduction from a Boston law firm, the townspeople accepted her with the cold politeness typical of rural New England communities toward outsiders. What they did not know, what Cordelia herself had only recently discovered, was that her arrival in Ashford Hollow was not coincidence. It was destiny. Or perhaps more accurately, it was a curse that had been pursuing the Thorne women for over 2 centuries. The story truly begins, not in 1897, but in 1692, in the village of Salem, Massachusetts. There, a woman named Goody Mercy Thorne was accused of witchcraft during the height of the Salem hysteria. According to trial records preserved in the Essex County Archives, Mercy Thorne was condemned not for the typical accusations of spectral evidence or causing sickness in livestock. No, her crime was far more specific and disturbing. Witnesses testified that on 3 separate occasions during the full moon, Mercy Thorne had been seen running through the forest on all 4s, her eyes reflecting moonlight like those of a wolf, her mouth dripping with the blood of freshly killed deer. Mercy Thorne was hanged on September 22, 1692. She was the last woman executed in the Salem witch trials. Her final words, recorded by the court clerk, were neither a confession nor a prayer. She simply said, "The blood knows the moon. My daughters will understand when their time comes." But what did she mean by their time? And why, exactly 205 years later, would her direct descendant, Cordelia Thorne, die under eerily similar circumstances, found in the wilderness during a full moon? her body bearing marks that the town physician refused to describe in his official report. The answers lie in 3 leather-bound diaries, a series of witness testimonies that were suppressed by local authorities, and a pattern of deaths that connects Salem, Massachusetts, to the remote forests of Maine through an unbroken line of Thorne women, each meeting their fate in their 28th year of life. This is the story of the bloodline curse of the Salem Thornes. And the question that remains unanswered to this day is simple yet terrifying. Was Cordelia Thorne the victim of an inherited madness, a tragic medical condition, or something far more ancient and terrible, a curse that transforms flesh and bone under the light of the full moon? To understand what happened to Cordelia Thorne in the autumn of 1897, we must first understand the world she inhabited and the shadow that Salem cast over her family for more than 2 centuries. The year 1692 marked one of the darkest chapters in American colonial history. Between February and September of that year, Salem Village and the surrounding Massachusetts Bay Colony were consumed by a witch hunt hysteria that would result in the execution of 20 people, most of them women. The causes of this mass hysteria have been debated by historians for centuries. Some attribute it to ergot poisoning from contaminated rye, which can cause hallucinations and violent convulsions. Others point to political tensions, religious extremism, and the settlement of personal grudges under the guise of spiritual warfare. But the case of Goody Mercy Thorne stood apart from the others, even in that climate of paranoia and superstition. Mercy Thorne was not accused by hysterical teenage girls, as was typical of most Salem accusations. Her accusers were adult men, farmers, hunters, and trappers who claimed to have witnessed her transformations firsthand. The trial records, preserved in meticulous detail by court clerks who took their duty seriously, contain testimonies that are chillingly specific. One witness, a farmer named Josiah Kemp, testified under oath, "I did observe the woman Thorne on the night of the full moon in August, in the year of our Lord 1691. She was in the clearing near the old meeting house. At first I thought her to be in prayer, for she was kneeling. But then I saw her body convulse most violently, and I heard sounds no Christian woman should make, growls and snarls like unto a wild beast. I fled in terror, but I swear upon my immortal soul, when I looked back, the figure I saw running into the forest was no longer shaped as a woman." Another witness, a hunter named Abraham Cole, provided even more disturbing testimony. "I tracked what I believed to be a large wolf that had been killing sheep in our pastures. The tracks led me deep into the forest, but at dawn, the wolf tracks, they changed. They became the footprints of a woman, bare feet, human feet. They led directly to the door of Mercy Thorne's cottage. I reported this to Magistrate Hathorne, for I knew that no natural wolf could do such a thing. These testimonies were not dismissed as fantasy. They were entered into official court records and used as evidence for Mercy Thorne's execution. The magistrates, learned men who had studied theology and law, concluded that Mercy Thorne had made a pact with the devil, who had granted her the ability to transform into a wolf to do his evil work. But there was one piece of evidence that the court found particularly damning: a silver locket discovered in Mercy Thorne's possession. The locket bore strange symbols that the magistrates could not identify but assumed to be demonic in nature. Inside the locket was a lock of human hair and a small vial of what appeared to be mercury or liquid silver. When questioned about the locket, Mercy Thorne refused to speak. She would not confess, would not explain, would not beg for mercy. She was hanged on Gallows Hill on September 22, 1692. Her body was denied Christian burial and was instead thrown into an unmarked pit outside the town limits. The Thorne family, such as it was, scattered after Mercy's execution. The stigma of witchcraft was a brand that could not be erased. Mercy's only daughter, a girl of 16 named Ruth Thorne, fled Massachusetts and disappeared into the vast wilderness of the New England frontier. For decades, there was no record of the Thorne name in any colonial documents, but the bloodline survived. In 1723, a woman named Ruth Thorne was recorded as having died in a small settlement in what is now New Hampshire. The cause of death was listed as killed by wild animals during the full moon. Her daughter, Sarah Thorne, would later move to Vermont. Sarah died in 1751 at the age of 28, under circumstances described only as violent and unexplainable in the town records. The pattern continued, generation after generation. Every Thorne woman who lived to see her 28th year would die mysteriously during or shortly after a full moon. Sometimes the deaths were attributed to animal attacks. Other times they were simply listed as disappeared or lost in the wilderness. By the mid-19th century, the Thorne family had dwindled to a thin line of daughters, each one inheriting not only the family name, but also what appeared to be an inescapable fate. Cordelia Thorne was born in 1869 in a small town in Vermont. Her mother, Margaret Thorne, died when Cordelia was only 6 months old. The official cause of death was recorded as hemorrhagic fever, but the local physician's private notes later discovered told a different story. Margaret Thorne had died violently during the full moon of her 28th year. Her body had been found in the woods, torn as if by claws, though no animal tracks were present. Cordelia was raised by her maternal aunt, a woman who refused to speak of the Thorne family history. Cordelia grew up knowing only that her family name carried some dark shame connected to Salem, but the details were kept from her. She was a bright, studious child who found solace in books and eventually secured a position as an assistant librarian in Boston. It was there, in the dusty archives of the Boston Public Library, that Cordelia Thorne would discover the truth about her family. In March of 1897, while cataloguing a collection of historical documents donated by the estate of a deceased lawyer, Cordelia came across a sealed box marked with her family name. Inside were legal papers dating back to the Salem trials, including the complete trial transcript of Goody Mercy Thorne. But more importantly, the box contained something else. 3 leather-bound diaries written by Thorne women across different generations, each one documenting the same horrifying experience. The diaries spoke of a blood curse. They described physical transformations during the full moon. They detailed desperate attempts to suppress the curse using silver, mercury, and various herbs. And most chillingly, they each ended abruptly, with final entries written on or near the 28th birthday of the author. Cordelia Thorne read these diaries with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Surely this was madness. Hereditary insanity, perhaps. Some genetic disorder that caused violent episodes and hallucinations. The year was 1897, the age of science and reason. Surely there was a rational explanation. But as Cordelia read, a cold realization crept over her. She would turn 28 on November 14th, 1897, and November 14th, 1897 would be a full moon. The final diary entry she read was written by her own mother, Margaret Thorne, dated just 3 days before her death. The pull of the moon grows stronger each night. I can feel the change beginning in my bones. I have procured silver bullets and a locket of pure silver, but I fear it will not be enough. If you are reading this, my daughter, know that I tried to break the curse. I tried to save you from this fate. But the blood remembers what the mind forgets. When your time comes, seek the truth in Salem. Seek the origin. Perhaps there you will find what I could not, a way to end this. Cordelia Thorne's decision to travel to Ashford Hollow, Maine, was not random. Hidden within the legal, Documents in the sealed box was a deed to a small property, a cabin on the outskirts of a logging town called Ashford Hollow. The deed was dated 1695 and bore the name of Ruth Thorne, Mercy's daughter, who had apparently purchased the land after fleeing Salem. The property had passed through the female line of the family, though none had lived there for over a century. More intriguingly, attached to the deed was a map, hand-drawn and annotated in faded ink. The map showed the location of the cabin and marked 3 specific locations in the surrounding forest with a symbol Cordelia had come to recognize. The crescent moon overlaid with a circle, the same symbol engraved on her ancestor's silver locket. Cordelia felt compelled by something she could not name, perhaps curiosity, perhaps desperation, to visit this place. She requested an extended leave from her position in Boston and made arrangements to travel to Maine. She arrived in Ashford Hollow on April 23, 1897, 7 months before her 28th birthday. The town's reception of her was cold, but not hostile. When she presented herself at the town hall and explained that she was the legal owner of the old Thorne property, the town clerk, a man named Silas Pemberton, gave her a long, appraising look. "Thorne, you say? That name hasn't been spoken here in many a year. The cabin's still standing, though I can't say it's fit for habitation. Folks around here, well, they tend to avoid that part of the woods." "Why? Is that?" Cordelia asked. Pemberton hesitated, then shrugged. "Old superstitions. You know how country folk are. Strange things happen in deep woods. Animals go missing. Hunters report seeing, well, things that don't make sense in the clear light of day." Cordelia pressed him, but he would say no more. Instead, he arranged for a local handyman, a gruff man named Samuel Frost, to guide her to the property and help her assess its condition. The cabin stood in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. It was smaller than Cordelia had imagined, just 2 rooms and a stone fireplace. The structure was solid, built from thick logs that had weathered more than a century of harsh Maine winters. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of old wood. But it was not abandoned. Someone or something had been there recently. Fresh scratches marked the wooden floor near the door. The fireplace contained ashes that could not have been more than a few months old. And on the mantel, covered in dust, was an object that made Cordelia's blood run cold, a silver locket, identical to the one described in her ancestor's trial records. Samuel Frost saw her reaction. "You all right, miss?" Cordelia picked up the locket with trembling fingers. It was heavy, solid silver, and bore the same symbol, the crescent moon and circle. She opened it. Inside was a lock of dark hair and a small vial of liquid silver, just as the court records had described. "This place," Cordelia said quietly. "Has my family been here recently?" Frost shifted uncomfortably. "Can't say for certain, but folks in town have reported seeing lights in these woods during full moons, and sounds. Howling, but not quite like any wolf we know. The last person who came out here to investigate was old Sheriff Dawson, about 5 years back. He came back pale as a ghost, said he wouldn't speak of what he saw, and resigned his position the next day." Cordelia decided to stay. She informed the town that she would be taking up residence in the cabin and to establish herself respectably in the community. She applied for and received the position of town librarian, which had been vacant. The small salary would sustain her while she conducted her own investigation into her family's history. Over the following months, Cordelia devoted herself to 2 tasks: organizing the town library during the day and researching her family's curse at night. The library, though modest, contained some surprising resources. There were old newspapers dating back to the 1820s, town records, and several personal journals donated by founding families. Cordelia combed through them systematically, looking for any mention of the Thorne name or unexplained deaths during full moons. She found them. In October 1823, a hunter named David Morris reported tracking a large wolf of unusual size through the forest. His journal entry, preserved in the library archives, described the hunt. "The beast led me on a chase for 3 hours. Its tracks were strange, sometimes 4-legged, sometimes appearing almost as if 2-legged. I lost the trail near dawn at the edge of the old Thorne property. The tracks seemed to change. I cannot explain it rationally." In November 1851, the town physician, Dr. Amos Whitfield, recorded treating a young boy who claimed to have been chased by a woman who ran like a wolf. The boy was found hiding in a barn, traumatized and incoherent. Dr. Whitfield dismissed the story as childish imagination, but noted the child bore scratch marks on his arms that resembled claw marks, though no wolf has been seen in this area for several years. In March 1872, a woman named Eliza Hartwell wrote a letter to her sister in Boston, a letter that was later donated to the library. In it, she described a disturbing encounter. "On the night of the full moon, I was returning from the midwife's house when I saw a figure in the road ahead. It appeared to be a woman, naked and crawling on all fours. As I approached with my lantern, the figure turned toward me. The face was human, but the eyes, dear sister, the eyes were not human. They were golden and reflective like an animal's. The woman, or creature, let out a howl that curdled my blood, then fled into the forest with inhuman speed. I have not slept soundly since." Cordelia compiled these accounts into a journal of her own, cross-referencing them with the dates of full moons and the locations where the encounters occurred. A pattern emerged, clear and undeniable. Every generation during the full moon, something emerged from the Thorne property and roamed the forests of Ashford Hollow. But the most disturbing discovery came from the town's birth and death records. Cordelia found documentation of several Thorne women who had lived in or near Ashford Hollow over the past 2 centuries. Every single one had died at the age of 28, within days of a full moon. Their deaths were variously attributed to animal attack, lost in wilderness, fever, or simply unknown causes. As summer turned to autumn, Cordelia began to experience changes in herself. At first they were subtle, an increased sensitivity to moonlight, which would wake her from sleep. She found herself strangely drawn to the forest at night, fighting an urge to run through the trees. Her senses seemed to sharpen. She could hear conversations from remarkable distances. The smell of the forest became intoxicating. Then came the dreams, vivid, violent dreams of hunting, of running on 4 legs through moonlit forests, of the taste of fresh blood and the thrill of the chase. Cordelia would wake in her cabin, her heart pounding, her sheets soaked with sweat, and find dirt under her fingernails, dirt she could not remember collecting. She confided in no one. Who could she tell? The town already viewed her as an outsider. If she spoke of these experiences, she would be labeled mad and likely institutionalized. Instead, Cordelia turned to the one piece of protection her ancestors had relied upon, silver. She purchased every silver item she could afford, coins, jewelry, cutlery. She wore the silver locket from the mantle constantly, feeling its cool weight against her chest. She even commissioned the town blacksmith to create silver bullets, claiming they were for protection against wolves. The blacksmith, a practical man named Thomas Wade, obliged without question, though he remarked that he hadn't heard of wolves in the area for years. By late October, less than 3 weeks before her 28th birthday, Cordelia was sleeping with a loaded revolver containing 6 silver bullets under her pillow. The townspeople began to notice her deteriorating condition. She appeared exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hands trembled. she became jumpy, reacting with alarm to sudden noises. Several library patrons commented to each other that Miss Thorne seems unwell, and perhaps the isolation is affecting her mind. On October 28th, 2 weeks before her birthday, Cordelia made a decision. She would spend the night of her 28th birthday, November 14th, the full moon, locked inside the old stone church at the center of town. If the curse was real, if she was truly in danger of transforming, the church's iron chains and holy ground might protect her. Or at the very least, being in town would ensure witnesses who could stop her if she became dangerous. She approached Reverend Isaiah Blackwood with her request. The Reverend was an elderly man, respected in the community, but he was also a man of compassion. Cordelia told him a partial truth, that she suffered from episodes of sleepwalking during full moons, a condition she had inherited from her mother, and she feared she might wander into the forest and become lost or injured. Reverend Blackwood agreed to help her, though he seemed troubled by her request. He gave her a key to the church and said she could spend the night there if it would ease her mind. What Cordelia did not tell him was the last thing she had discovered in her research, a letter written by Ruth Thorne in 1720, found tucked inside one of the old diaries. The letter was addressed, "To my daughter, and to all daughters of our blood who come after." It read, "The curse is not of the devil as the Salem magistrates believed. It is in our blood, passed from mother to daughter since time before memory. We are the children of two worlds, human and beast. The moon calls to the beast within us, and on our 28th year, when our blood is at its strongest, the beast demands to be free. Silver is our only protection, for it burns the beast and reminds us of our human form. But even silver cannot stop the transformation forever. If you are reading this, you must decide, will you embrace the beast and live in the wild, or will you fight it and die human? There is no third path. I chose to live. I pray you find the strength to do what I could not, to end this curse forever." Tell us in the comments, what do you think is happening to Cordelia Thorne? Is this a medical condition, a hereditary madness, or something far more ancient and terrifying? We'll be reading your theories as this story unfolds. The first week of November 1897 brought an early winter storm to Ashford Hollow. Snow fell heavily, coating the town in a blanket of white that muffled sounds and isolated households. For Cordelia Thorne, the approaching storm felt like an omen. November 7th, exactly 1 week before the full moon, Cordelia went to the cabin in the woods one final time to retrieve additional items she might need for her vigil in the church. What she found there would shake her understanding of everything she thought she knew. The cabin door was ajar. Snow had drifted into the entryway, but deeper inside, where the structure was still intact, Cordelia found evidence of recent habitation. The fireplace had been used within the past day or two. The ashes were still warm. On the wooden table, arranged deliberately, were 3 objects: a large hunting knife, a coil of thick rope, and a handwritten note. The note was addressed to her. "Cordelia Thorne, you are not alone. Others of our bloodline survive. We have been watching you since you arrived. You must not attempt to resist the transformation. Fighting it will only make it worse. When the moon calls, you must answer. Meet us at the marked stone in Widow's Grove on the night of your birthday. We will help you understand. We will teach you to survive. Bring the silver locket. A sister of the blood." Cordelia's hands shook as she read the note. Others? There were other Thorne women alive? Women who had survived their 28th year? She searched the cabin frantically, looking for any other clue. In the rafters, hidden beneath loose floorboards, she found a metal box. Inside were more documents, letters, journal fragments, and a leather-bound book that appeared to be a family record, spanning over a century. The family record was meticulous. It listed the names of Thorne women, their birth dates, and their death dates. But some of the entries had been amended. Several women listed as died had that word crossed out and replaced with survived, joined the grove. The grove, Widow's Grove, where the note had instructed her to meet these mysterious sisters of the blood. Cordelia took the metal box and returned to town. For the next several days, she barely slept, poring over the documents by candlelight in her small room above the library. The family record revealed a staggering truth. The Thorne curse did not always result in death. Some women, a minority but a significant number, had survived their 28th year. But to survive, they had made a choice that those who died had refused to make. They had embraced the transformation. They had become, in essence, creatures of the wild, living in the forests, hunting at night, and maintaining only tenuous connections to human society. One journal fragment, written by a woman named Abigail Thorne in 1802, described the choice. "I have lived as the beast for 3 years now. The first transformation was agony beyond description, but subsequent changes have become not easy, but manageable. I hunt deer and small game. I avoid human settlements during the full moon. In my human form, I live as a widow in a small cabin, trading pelts for supplies. It is a lonely existence, but it is existence. The alternative, to fight the change and die torn apart by one's own body, is no alternative at all." Another entry from 1856, written by someone named Catherine Thorne, was more disturbing. "The sisters tell me that we are not cursed, we are blessed. We are the last remnants of an ancient bloodline that stretches back to the old world, to a time when humans and wolves were not so distinct. The Salem trials sought to destroy us, but we survived. We will always survive. The moon is our mother. The forest is our home. Let the human world have its churches and its laws. We have a higher calling." Cordelia was torn. If what these documents suggested was true, she had a choice. She could resist the transformation, as her mother and so many others had done, and almost certainly die in the process. Or she could accept it, embrace it, and live. But live as what? A monster? A fugitive? A creature caught between two worlds? On November 10th, 4 days before the full moon, the first incident occurred. Thomas Wade, the blacksmith who had made Cordelia's silver bullets, was closing his shop at dusk when he heard a sound outside, a low, rumbling growl that seemed too deep to come from any dog. He grabbed a lantern and opened the door, peering into the gathering darkness. What he saw, he would later swear before God and the town council, was a woman standing at the edge of the tree line, approximately 50 yards from his shop. The woman was naked despite the cold, and appeared to be in some kind of distress. She was bent over, her body convulsing. As Wade watched, frozen in shock, the woman seemed to change. Her limbs elongated, her spine curved in an unnatural manner, and then she dropped to all fours and let out a howl that echoed through the valley. Wade slammed the door shut, bolted it, and spent the night huddled by his forge, a hammer clutched in his white-knuckled hands. The next morning, he reported the incident to the town constable, a young man named Peter Dawes. Dawes, who was relatively new to the position and eager to establish his authority, took the report seriously and organized a small group of men to investigate. They found tracks in the snow, tracks that began as bare human footprints, then gradually changed, becoming longer, wider, with claw marks. The tracks led into the forest in the direction of the old Thorne property. Dawes and his men followed the tracks for nearly a mile before losing them in a rocky area where the snow had not accumulated. But they found something else, a torn piece of fabric snagged on a branch. The fabric was from a woman's dress, dark grey wool. It matched the description of a dress that Cordelia Thorne had been seen wearing the previous day. Dawes confronted Cordelia at the library that afternoon. "Miss Thorne, were you in the forest last night?" Cordelia, who had no memory of the previous evening after returning to her room, lied. "No, Constable. I was in my room all night. I wasn't feeling well." "Did anyone see you? Can anyone confirm that?" "I live alone, Constable. No one saw me." Dawes examined her carefully. She looked exhausted, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. "Miss Thorne, I need to ask you directly. Have you been experiencing unusual episodes? Sleepwalking? Memory lapses?" Cordelia's heart hammered in her chest. She chose her words carefully. "I have had trouble sleeping, yes. The isolation, perhaps. Why do you ask?" Dawes showed her the piece of fabric. "This was found in the forest. It appears to match your clothing." Cordelia stared at the fabric. It was indeed from her dress, a dress she had been wearing yesterday, but she had no memory of going into the forest. Had she? The dreams had been so vivid lately that she could no longer distinguish them from reality. I may have gone for a walk," she admitted. "I don't remember clearly. The past few days have been confused." Dawes softened slightly. "Miss Thorne, I think you need to see Dr. Brennan. There's been talk in town that you're not well. No shame in admitting you need help." Cordelia agreed to see the doctor, though she had no intention of telling him the truth. Dr. Harold Brennan was the town's only physician, a competent if unimaginative man in his early 60s. When Cordelia presented herself at his office on November 11th, 3 days before the full moon, he conducted a thorough examination. He found her physically healthy, if somewhat underweight and clearly exhausted. Her reflexes were unusually sharp, almost animal-like in their quickness. Her pupils dilated abnormally in response to light. And when he tested her grip strength, he was startled to find it stronger than that of most men he had examined. "Miss Thorne," he said carefully, "I'm going to speak frankly with you. Your symptoms suggest several possibilities. Nervous exhaustion, certainly. But there are other signs that concern me. Have you been exposed to any unusual substances? Mercury, perhaps? Certain metals can cause neurological symptoms." Cordelia thought of the liquid silver in the locket. "Not that I'm aware of." Dr. Brennan made notes in his ledger. "I'm going to recommend complete rest. No work for at least 2 weeks. I'll provide a tonic that should help you sleep more soundly. And I strongly suggest you consider returning to Boston, at least temporarily. The isolation here is clearly affecting you." He paused, then added in a lower voice, "There's something else I should mention. Years ago, when I was a young physician in New Hampshire, I treated a woman who exhibited symptoms very similar to yours. Agitation during full moons, memory lapses, abnormal strength and sensory acuity. Her family believed she was suffering from lycanthropy, a delusion in which the patient believes herself to be transforming into a wolf. It's a recognized medical condition, though rare. The standard treatment is hospitalization and sedation during episodes." "What happened to her?" Cordelia asked. Dr. Brennan's expression darkened. "She died. She wandered into the forest during a full moon while under her family's care and was found 3 days later. The official cause of death was exposure, but—" He hesitated. "Her body bore wounds that suggested she had fought with a large animal, or perhaps had become one." Cordelia left the doctor's office with a prescription for laudanum she would never fill. 3 days remained. On November 13th, the day before her birthday and the full moon, Cordelia made her final preparations. She had decided not to lock herself in the church as originally planned. The note from the Sisters of the Blood had changed everything. If there were others who had survived, who had learned to live with the curse, she needed to meet them. She needed to understand. She packed a small bag with essential items: the silver locket, her mother's diary, the revolver with silver bullets, matches, and a warm cloak. She wrote a letter to Reverend Blackwood, apologizing for changing her plans and assuring him she would be safe. She did not mail the letter. Instead, she left it on her desk in the library, along with a second letter, this one addressed to whoever finds this. In it, she described everything: her family history, the documents she had found, her suspicions about the curse, and her decision to meet the Sisters of the Blood in Widow's Grove. "If I do not return," she wrote, "let it be known that I went willingly, seeking answers. If the transformation is real, if I become something other than human, I pray that I will retain enough of myself to choose death by my own hand rather than become a threat to innocent people. The silver bullets are for that purpose. If I am found dead, know that I died by choice, in full possession of my faculties, and that my family's curse ends with me." She sealed the letter and left it prominently displayed where it would be found when she failed to appear for work the next day. As darkness fell, on November 13th, Cordelia walked through the quiet streets of Ashford Hollow one final time. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The air was bitterly cold, and the sky was clearing, revealing a partial moon that would be full the following night. She passed the blacksmith shop, the general store, the church where she had planned to seek sanctuary. She saw Constable Dawes making his evening rounds and nodded to him. He tipped his hat, his expression troubled. He clearly wanted to say something, but in the end, he simply watched her walk past. Cordelia continued through town and took the forest path that led to Widow's Grove. The path was overgrown and rarely used, but she followed it easily, her enhanced senses guiding her even in the darkness. After an hour of walking, she reached the clearing known as Widow's Grove. It was a circular space, perhaps 50 feet in diameter, dominated by a massive flat stone at its center. The marked stone mentioned in the note. She was not alone. 3 women stood near the stone, wrapped in fur cloaks, their faces partially obscured by hoods. They had been waiting for her. As Cordelia approached, the tallest of the 3 women lowered her hood. She was middle-aged, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that caught the moonlight and reflected it with an amber glow. "Cordelia Thorne," the woman said. "Welcome. I am Catherine Thorne, your cousin 4 times removed. These are your sisters, Margaret and Ruth, also of our bloodline. We have watched you struggle these past months. We know your fear. We have all felt it. But tomorrow night you will understand. Tomorrow night you will be reborn." Cordelia's voice was steady, though her heart raced. "What happens to me tomorrow night?" Catherine smiled, revealing teeth that seemed slightly too long, too sharp. "Tomorrow night, under the full moon of your 28th birthday, the transformation will complete. You will become what you were always meant to be. You will become one of us, a wolf of Salem, a daughter of the ancient blood. And you will have to choose. Will you embrace your true nature? Or will you fight it and tear yourself apart from within? And if I choose to embrace it, then you will live. You will hunt with us. You will be free in ways that human women can never be free. You will be powerful. But you will also be forever separated from the human world. You cannot have both. And if I choose to fight it?" Catherine's expression became somber. "Then you will die as your mother died and her mother before her. The transformation cannot be stopped, only accepted. Fighting it is like trying to hold back the tide. You will drown in your own resistance." Cordelia stood silently for a long moment, the cold wind whipping her cloak around her. Then she asked the question that had haunted her since she first learned of the curse. "Is there no cure, no way to break the cycle?" Catherine shook her head slowly. We are what we are. This is not a curse. Cordelia, it is our inheritance, our birthright. The world called Mercy Thorne a witch because they could not understand what she was. But she was not a monster. She was the mother of our line, and her blood runs true in us all. Cordelia Thorne disappeared from Ashford Hollow on the night of November 14th, 1897. Her body was never recovered, though evidence of her final hours would surface gradually over the following decades. On the morning of November 15th, when Cordelia failed to open the library, Reverend Blackwood became concerned. He and Constable Dawes went to her room above the library and found it empty, though her belongings were still there. They found the letter she had left on her desk. The letter caused an immediate sensation in the small town. Constable Dawes organized the largest search party in Ashford Hollow's history. Nearly 40 men, armed with rifles and lanterns, who combed the forests surrounding Widow's Grove. What they found at the grove horrified them. The marked stone was covered in blood, fresh blood that had not yet frozen in the cold. Scattered around the clearing were pieces of torn fabric, claw marks scored deep into the earth, and footprints, both human and something else, that led away in multiple directions before disappearing. Most disturbing of all, they found Cordelia's silver locket lying in the center of the stone. The locket was bent and damaged, as if it had been torn from someone's neck with great force. Inside, the vial of liquid. Silver had shattered. Near the stone, the searchers found one of Cordelia's boots and shreds of her dress, but no body, no blood trail that could be followed to a definitive conclusion, just evidence of violence and chaos. Dr. Brennan, who accompanied the search party, examined the scene with a physician's clinical eye. His official report, filed with the county coroner, stated, "Evidence suggests Miss Thorne met with foul play, likely attacked by a large predatory animal or animals. However, the nature of the wounds on the torn clothing and the pattern of blood distribution are inconsistent with any known predator in this region. The case must be classified as suspicious death, with the body presumed deceased but not recovered." The unofficial story, the one whispered in parlours and taverns, was far more lurid. The townspeople spoke of wolves, or things that resembled wolves but walked on two legs. They spoke of the Thorne curse, of Salem witchcraft, of blood that called to blood. Within weeks, Ashford Hollow developed a reputation as a haunted place, and property values declined. The town's investigation concluded with no arrests and no resolution. Cordelia Thorne was declared legally dead in absentia in March of 1898. Her few possessions, including the diaries and documents, were seized as evidence and eventually stored in the Ashford Hollow town archives, where they remained largely forgotten for decades. But the story did not end there. In 1923, a journalist named Robert Finch from the Boston Globe arrived in Ashford Hollow while researching a book on unsolved disappearances in rural New England. Finch gained access to the town archives and spent several weeks reviewing the Cordelia Thorne case. He interviewed elderly residents who remembered the incident and collected their stories. One interview, with a former member of the search party named Edwin Morris, contained a startling claim. Morris, who was 78 years old at the time of the interview, stated, "I didn't tell the constable at the time because I knew they'd think me mad. But 3 months after Miss Thorne disappeared, in February of '98, I was ice fishing on Lake Hebron, about 10 miles north of town. It was late afternoon, near dusk. I saw a woman standing at the edge of the forest, watching me. She was dressed in animal furs, and even from a distance I knew her face. It was Cordelia Thorne, I'm certain of it. She looked different, wild. Her eyes caught the light. Strangely, when I called out to her, she turned and ran into the forest faster than any human should be able to run. I never reported it because I knew no one would believe me." Morris was not the only one to report such sightings. Between 1898 and 1920, at least 7 different people claimed to have seen a woman matching Cordelia's description in the remote forests of northern Maine. She was always alone, always dressed in animal skins, and always fled when approached. In 1935, a team of folklorists from Bowdoin College conducted a study of local legends in the region. They collected oral histories that spoke of wolf women who lived in the deepest parts of the forest, women who were said to transform during full moons and hunt in packs. The lead researcher, Professor Margaret Holloway, noted in her published paper, "While these accounts are clearly rooted in European lycanthropy legends, the specificity of details and the consistency of descriptions across unrelated witnesses suggest that the legends may have some basis in actual encounters with individuals living in extreme isolation, possibly suffering from hereditary neurological or psychological conditions that manifest as wolf-like behavior." The most credible post-disappearance evidence surfaced in 1958, more than 60 years after Cordelia vanished. A construction crew working on a new logging road, approximately 15 miles north of Ashford Hollow, discovered a crude shelter hidden in a ravine. The shelter was built from logs and stones and had clearly been inhabited for many years. Inside, they found the skeletal remains of what appeared to be a woman, along with various personal effects. Among those effects was a diary. The diary was badly damaged by water and time, but portions of it were still legible. The handwriting matched samples of Cordelia Thorne's writing preserved in the Ashford Hollow archives. The dated entries ranged from November 1897 to what appeared to be October 1923, suggesting that Cordelia Thorne, or someone using her name, had survived in the wilderness for at least 26 years after her disappearance. The entries were disturbing and fragmented. Some described the experience of transformation in clinical detail. Others spoke of hunting, of the sensation of running through forests at night, of the constant struggle between human reason and animal instinct. Still others revealed that Cordelia was not alone, that she lived as part of a small community of women who shared her condition. One entry, dated December 1899, read, "I have been wolf more than woman now. The transformations come easier. The pain has lessened. Catherine was right. Acceptance is the only path to survival. But I have not forgotten who I was. I keep this diary as a reminder. I was Cordelia Thorne, born 1869, daughter of Margaret. I was human. I am still human, even when the moon calls and the beast rises. I must remember." Another entry, from July 1910. "Ruth died last night during transformation. She fought it, tried to resist. Her body could not withstand the internal conflict. We buried her by the lake. She was 42 years old. I am now the oldest of our pack. The younger ones look to me for guidance. I teach them what Catherine taught me, surrender to survive. There is no going back to the human world. This is our life now." The final legible entry was dated October 1923, though the date was smudged and uncertain. "I am 54 years old, ancient by the standards of our kind. The transformations grow harder again. My bones are weaker. I think of my mother, who chose to fight rather than submit. I understand her choice now. There comes a time when survival is no longer enough. I have lived as beast for so long that I barely remember being woman. Perhaps it is time to let the beast consume me entirely, or time to end this and die human. I will decide at the next full moon." No further entries followed. The skeletal remains found in the shelter were sent to the University of Maine for analysis. The anthropology department determined that the remains were those of a woman between 50 and 60 years old who had died sometime in the 1920s. The bones showed evidence of unusual stress fractures and deformities, particularly in the jaw and spine, consistent with severe and repeated trauma. The cause of death could not be definitively determined, though the position of the remains, Near a loaded revolver containing corroded silver, bullets suggested the possibility of suicide. A small silver locket was found with the remains. It bore the same symbol Cordelia had inherited from her ancestors, a crescent moon overlaid with a circle. Inside was a lock of dark hair and a shattered vial that had once contained liquid silver. The remains were buried in an unmarked grave in the Ashford Hollow cemetery in 1959. The diary and personal effects were turned over to the Maine Historical Society, where they remain in storage to this day, accessible only to researchers with special permission. The official conclusion reached by both law enforcement and academic investigators was that Cordelia Thorne had suffered a severe mental breakdown in 1897, fled into the wilderness, and survived there for several decades through a combination of skill and luck before dying of natural causes in the early 1920s. The descriptions of transformation and wolf-like behavior in her diary were attributed to delusion, possibly exacerbated by isolation and consumption of contaminated water or plants containing hallucinogenic compounds. But questions remain. How did a woman with no survival training manage to live alone in the harsh Maine wilderness for over 2 decades? Why did multiple independent witnesses report seeing her exhibiting behaviors that matched the transformation patterns described in her family's historical accounts? And most troubling, what became of the other women Cordelia mentioned in her diary, the pack she claimed to live with? To this day, hikers and hunters in the remote forests of northern Maine occasionally report encounters with what they describe as wolf women, figures that appear human but move with animal grace and speed, their eyes reflecting light with an amber glow. These reports are generally dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications of ordinary wildlife, but in Ashford Hollow, where the Thorne legend began, the older residents still speak in hushed tones of the curse that never truly ended. They point to the fact that the town has never been able to keep a librarian for more than a few years. They mention the howls that are sometimes heard during full moons, howls that sound almost human. And they tell visitors to avoid Widow's Grove after dark, especially when the moon is full. The bloodline curse of the Salem Thornes may have claimed Cordelia, but whether it died with her or continues in the deep forests remains an open question that no one seems willing to definitively answer. So we reach the end of our investigation into the bloodline curse of the Salem Thornes, though perhaps end is not quite the right word. For stories like this one, there are no clean endings, no satisfying conclusions that tie every thread into a neat bow. There are only questions, theories, and the unsettling knowledge that truth often wears many faces. What really happened to Cordelia Thorne in the forests of Maine between 1897 and her death in the 1920s? Was she victim of a genuine, supernatural curse, inheritor of a genetic mutation that caused wolf-like transformations under specific lunar conditions? Or was she simply a woman crushed beneath the weight of family history and expectation, driven to madness by the belief that she was doomed to become a monster? Let us consider the theories that historians, medical professionals, and paranormal investigators have proposed over the years. Theory 1. Hereditary medical condition. Some researchers point to a cluster of rare medical conditions that could explain the Thorne family experiences. Hypertrichosis, a condition causing excessive hair growth, combined with porphyria, which causes severe photosensitivity and can create fang-like teeth, might account for the physical descriptions. Add congenital generalized hypertrichosis, which intensifies at certain ages, and you have a plausible medical explanation for why women in the family experience dramatic changes around their 28th year. The silver's effectiveness might be explained as a placebo effect, or the metal's antimicrobial properties may have helped manage some symptoms. The transformations described in the diaries could have been fever-induced hallucinations during episodes of acute porphyria attacks, which are known to be triggered by stress and hormonal changes. Theory 2. Ergot, poisoning and mass hysteria. Others suggest that the original Salem accusations against Mercy Thorne were indeed based on ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on rye and causes hallucinations, convulsions, and a sensation of the skin crawling. The curse could have been perpetuated through generations not by genetics, but by belief, a form of mass hysteria in which successive Thorne women, knowing the family history, experienced psychosomatic symptoms that fulfilled their own expectations. Cordelia's transformation might have been a psychotic break triggered by stress, isolation, and her deep immersion in family documents describing monstrous changes. The silver's protection could have functioned purely as a psychological anchor. Theory 3. The supernatural explanation. Then there are those who believe that some phenomena cannot be reduced to medical or psychological explanations. They point to the consistency of witness testimonies across centuries, the physical evidence of transformations documented by multiple independent observers, and the fact that Cordelia Thorne survived for over 2 decades in conditions that should have been impossible for a woman suffering from mental illness. They argue that lycanthropy, while dismissed by modern science, may represent a rare but genuine condition that exists at the intersection of biology and something beyond our current understanding. The silver's effectiveness, they note, is a detail found in lycanthropy legends across many cultures, suggesting it may be rooted in actual observation rather than mere superstition. Theory 4. Voluntary wilderness. Living a fourth, more mundane theory suggests that Cordelia Thorne made a conscious choice to abandon civilization and live as a hermit in the Maine wilderness. Perhaps she suffered from social anxiety or agoraphobia and found the isolated life preferable to the constraints of small-town society. The transformations she described might have been metaphorical, describing her psychological transformation from civilized woman to wild hermit. The other women she mentioned might have been other hermits or indigenous people living in the remote regions. Her apparent wolf-like behaviors could simply have been the result of decades living in close contact with nature, developing heightened senses and animal-like movement patterns. We may never know which of these theories, if any, holds the truth. What we do know is this: Cordelia Thorne disappeared on November 14, 1897, the night of her 28th birthday, during a full moon. She was seen by multiple witnesses exhibiting unusual behavior in the weeks before her disappearance. Her remains were discovered over 6 decades later in a wilderness shelter, along with a diary that describes experiences that defy rational explanation. And in the forests of northern Maine, to this day, people report encounters with figures that seem to exist somewhere between human and animal. The Thorne family line, as far as official records show, ended with Cordelia. No other direct descendants have been identified. The family name has faded into obscurity, remembered now only in academic papers and local legends. But sometimes, on clear nights when the moon is full, hikers in the remote northern forests report hearing howls that don't quite sound like wolves, and occasionally, in the winter snow, they find tracks that begin as paw prints but seem to shift, becoming longer, more human-like, before disappearing into the deep woods where no one dares to follow. The curse of Salem may have ended with Cordelia Thorne, or perhaps it simply learned to hide better, waiting in the shadows between moonlight and darkness, between legend and truth, between human and beast. The question remains: do you believe in curses? Do you believe that some families carry darkness in their blood, passed down through generations like a secret that refuses to die. Tell us what you think in the comments below. Share your theories about what really happened to Cordelia Thorne and the women of her bloodline. And if you've made it this far in our journey together, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another episode. We have more forgotten horrors to uncover, more secrets buried in dusty archives and lonely forests. Join our haunted community, because the past is never truly dead. It's not even past. It's just waiting in the shadows, watching, remembering, and sometimes when the moon is full and the night is dark, it reaches out to remind us that we are never as far from our ancestors as we'd like to believe. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and whatever you do, when you hear something howling in the darkness, don't assume it's just a wolf. This has been the story of the bloodline curse of the Salem Thornes. Thank you for joining us.